The morning mist hung thick over Ravenshollow estate as Captain Marcus Blackwood adjusted his leather gloves and checked his sword one final time. Behind him, 20 of the kingdom's most trusted palace guards stood in formation, their faces grim beneath polished helmets. The news had reached the royal palace just 3 days ago, sending shockwaves through the court that still reverberated in whispered conversations and worried glances. Queen Isabella's most precious jewelry collection had vanished without a trace. Not just any jewelry, but the legendary starfire sapphires that had belonged to the royal family for over 3 centuries. The necklace, earrings, and tiara were worth more than most nobles would see in 10 lifetimes, but their true value lay in their historical significance. They had been worn by every queen during coronation ceremonies since the founding of the kingdom. Lady Cordelia Ashworth, the queen's cousin and trusted confidant, had been the last person known to have access to the royal vault. As the keeper of the royal jewelry collection, she alone possessed the ancient silver key that opened the enchanted locks protecting the treasury. When the theft was discovered during a routine inventory, all eyes had turned to her sprawling estate on the kingdom's northern border. Captain Blackwood had known Lady Cordelia since childhood. They had grown up together in the shadow of the royal court, where his father served as head of palace security and her mother was the queen's lady-in-waiting. Cordelia had always been headstrong and independent, choosing to live away from court politics at her inherited estate, rather than remain in the palace like most royal relatives. This decision, once seen as charmingly eccentric, now cast a suspicious shadow over her character. The captain's boots crunched on the gravel path leading to the estate's main entrance. Ravenshollow was a magnificent property, with sprawling gardens, ancient oak trees, and a mansion that had stood for 200 years. The architecture spoke of old money and older secrets, with its Gothic spires reaching toward the cloudy sky and gargoyles perched along the roof lines like silent sentinels. As they approached the front door, Captain Blackwood noticed movement in one of the upper windows. A curtain twitched, then fell back into place. Someone was watching their arrival. He raised his hand, signaling his men to spread out and surround the building according to their predetermined plan. They had spent hours studying the estate's layout, identifying every possible entrance and exit. The massive oak door stood before them, carved with the Ashworth family crest depicting a silver wolf beneath a crescent moon. Captain Blackwood knocked firmly, the sound echoing through the morning stillness. Footsteps approached from within, slow and deliberate. The door opened to reveal Edmund Hartwell, Lady Cordelia's elderly butler, whose weathered face showed no surprise at their presence. "Captain Blackwood," Edmund said with a polite bow, his voice carrying the refined accent of someone who had served noble families his entire life. "Lady Cordelia has been expecting you. She is waiting in the morning room and asks that you join her for tea before conducting your search." The invitation surprised the captain. Most people facing accusations of theft would be hiding or preparing to flee, not offering refreshments to the investigating officers. Either Lady Cordelia was supremely confident in her innocence, or she was playing a dangerous game that could cost her everything. "I appreciate the hospitality, Edmund, but this is official business. We have a warrant signed by the Royal Chancellor to search these premises thoroughly. Lady Cordelia's cooperation would be appreciated, but it is not required." Edmund nodded gravely. "Of course, Captain. Lady Cordelia understands the gravity of the situation. She merely hoped to speak with you privately before your men begin their work. She has information that may prove helpful to your investigation." Captain Blackwood considered this carefully. Protocol demanded that he proceed with the search immediately, but his personal history with Cordelia made him curious about what she might have to say. Perhaps she had discovered something about the real thief, or maybe she had noticed suspicious activity around the estate that could provide valuable clues. "Very well," he decided, "but I will bring Lieutenant Hayes with me as a witness. The rest of my men will begin their search of the grounds and outbuildings while we speak." Edmund led them through the mansion's elegant hallways, past family portraits that seemed to watch their every move with painted eyes. The morning room was a cozy space with tall windows overlooking the estate's prize-winning rose garden. Lady Cordelia sat beside a small table set for tea, her auburn hair catching the filtered sunlight. She wore a simple blue dress that emphasized her natural beauty while maintaining an air of dignity despite the circumstances. "Marcus," she said, rising gracefully to greet him. Thank you for coming yourself rather than sending subordinates. I know this situation must be difficult for you given our friendship. Lady Cordelia, he replied formally, though his voice carried traces of warmth. I must inform you that you are under investigation for the theft of the Starfire sapphires. Anything you say may be used as evidence in proceedings against you. She smiled sadly. I understand completely. Please sit down. What I have to tell you may change everything about this investigation. The jewelry was not stolen from the royal vault, Marcus. It was never there in the first place. Captain Blackwood felt the blood drain from his face as Lady Cordelia's words sank in. Lieutenant Hayes shifted uncomfortably beside him, his hand instinctively moving toward his sword hilt. The implications of what she had just revealed could shake the very foundations of the kingdom's trust in its royal family. What exactly are you saying, Cordelia? Marcus asked, forgetting protocol and using her first name. The inventory records clearly show the Starfire sapphires were checked and verified just 6 months ago. Lady Cordelia poured tea with steady hands, though Marcus noticed a slight tremor as she set down the delicate porcelain pot. The pieces that were verified were exquisite replicas, Marcus. The real Starfire sapphires have been missing for nearly 2 years. I discovered this when I conducted my own private inventory after inheriting my position as keeper of the royal jewelry. She reached into a carved wooden box on the side table and withdrew a leather journal bound with silver clasps. Everything is documented here. Measurements, weight discrepancies, differences in the cut and clarity of the stones. The fakes are masterful work, but they are still fakes. Lieutenant Hayes leaned forward. Why didn't you report this discovery immediately? Concealing such information could be considered treason. Because, Cordelia said, meeting his gaze steadily, I suspected someone within the royal court was responsible, someone with access to the vault and knowledge of the security procedures. I needed time to investigate without alerting the real thief to my suspicions. Captain Blackwood studied her face carefully. In their childhood, Cordelia had never been able to lie convincingly. Her left eye would twitch slightly when she wasn't telling the truth, a tell that had gotten her into trouble with tutors and governesses. He watched for that familiar sign now, but saw nothing except genuine concern and determination. Show me the journal, he said. Cordelia handed over the leather-bound book, and Marcus began reading her meticulous notes. The details were staggering. She had documented not only the differences between the authentic pieces and the replicas, but it also tracked the movements of everyone with vault access over the past 3 years. The list included senior court officials, members of the royal family, and most surprisingly, Sir Reginald Thorncastle, the royal treasurer who had served the crown for over 20 years. Sir Reginald has been acting strangely lately, Cordelia continued as Marcus read. He has made several trips to neighboring kingdoms, claiming they were diplomatic missions to discuss trade agreements. But I discovered through my sources that he never attended any official meetings during these journeys. Outside, they could hear Captain Blackwood's men conducting their methodical search of the estate grounds. Voices called out occasionally as they checked stables, servant quarters, and storage buildings. The sound of their boots on gravel created a steady rhythm that underscored the tension in the morning room. There's something else, Cordelia said, lowering her voice. 3 weeks ago, I received an anonymous letter warning me to stop my investigation. The writer claimed that powerful people were involved and that I would face serious consequences if I continued digging into the matter. She produced a piece of parchment from the wooden box. The letter was written in an elegant script that could belong to any educated member of the court. The message was brief but chilling. Lady Ashworth, your curiosity regarding certain missing items has not gone unnoticed. For your own safety and that of your household, it would be wise to abandon this line of inquiry immediately. Some secrets are too dangerous to uncover. Lieutenant Hayes examined the letter carefully. This parchment is expensive, the kind used by wealthy merchants or court officials. The ink appears to be of high quality as well. Whoever wrote this has significant resources, which is exactly why I couldn't trust anyone at court with this information, Cordelia explained. I was planning to present my findings directly to Queen Isabella herself, but then the theft was discovered and reported. Suddenly, I found myself the primary suspect in a crime that had actually occurred years ago. Captain Blackwood closed the journal and looked directly at Cordelia. If what you're telling us is true, then someone has been planning this for a very long time. They arranged for the theft, created the replicas, and when you got too close to the truth, they orchestrated events to make you the scapegoat. That's exactly what I believe happened, she confirmed. The question now is how to prove it without alerting the real criminals to what we know. A commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Shouting voices grew louder, and then Sergeant Thompson burst through the morning room door without ceremony. His face was flushed with excitement and concern. "Captain Blackwood, sir. We found something in the old carriage house. You need to see this immediately." The three of them followed Sergeant Thompson outside and across the estate grounds to a building that had once housed the family's collection of carriages and coaches. Most of the vehicles had been sold off years ago when the Ashworth family fortunes declined, leaving the building largely empty except for storage. Inside the carriage house, surrounded by dusty furniture and forgotten household items, several guards stood around a wooden crate that had been partially hidden beneath old canvas covers. The crate was ornately carved and bore the royal seal of the kingdom. "We found this behind those old riding saddles," Sergeant Thompson explained. It was well hidden, but Thompson noticed footprints in the dust leading to that corner. Captain Blackwood approached the crate cautiously. The lock had been broken and the lid sat slightly askew. With careful hands, he lifted the top to reveal the contents inside. Nestled in beds of rich velvet lay pieces of jewelry that sparkled even in the dim light filtering through dirty windows. But these were not the Starfire sapphires. Instead, the crate contained an assortment of other valuable pieces, including several items that Marcus recognized as belonging to various noble families throughout the kingdom. Lady Cordelia gasped as she saw the contents. "Those earrings belong to the Duchess of Millhaven, and that brooch is from the Blackthorn family collection. Someone has been stealing from noble families across the kingdom." The discovery changed everything. What had begun as an investigation into a single theft had suddenly revealed evidence of a much larger criminal operation. Someone had been systematically targeting the kingdom's most valuable jewelry collections, and now they were using Cordelia's estate as a storage location without her knowledge. Captain Blackwood stared at the collection of stolen jewelry, his mind racing through the implications. Someone had been using Lady Cordelia's estate as a storage facility for their criminal enterprise, carefully planting evidence to implicate her in crimes she knew nothing about. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. "Sergeant Thompson, I want this entire building searched from floor to rafters," he ordered. "Look for any hidden compartments, loose floorboards, or concealed spaces. If there's one crate of stolen goods, there may be more." As his men began their systematic search, Marcus turned to Cordelia, who stood pale and shaken beside the discovered treasure. "Who has access to your estate besides your household staff? Any recent visitors, workers, or deliveries that seemed unusual?" Cordelia thought carefully, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "The groundskeeper, old Henrik, has been with the family for 30 years. The cook, Mrs. Pemberton, and 2 housemaids live on the property. Edmund, of course, has served as butler since before I was born. None of them would be involved in something like this." "What about visitors?" Lieutenant Hayes pressed. "Anyone who might have had opportunity to hide these items without your knowledge?" "Sir Reginald Thorncastle visited about a month ago," she said slowly. "He claimed to be conducting a routine inspection of noble estates for tax assessment purposes. It seemed unusual at the time because such inspections are typically announced well in advance. But I didn't want to appear uncooperative with royal officials." Captain Blackwood exchanged a meaningful look with his lieutenant. Sir Reginald's name was appearing too frequently in their investigation to be mere coincidence. As royal treasurer, he would have detailed knowledge of valuable collections throughout the kingdom, access to the royal vault, and connections that would allow him to move freely among noble estates. "How long was Sir Reginald here during his visit?" Marcus asked. 2 days. He claimed to need time for a thorough evaluation of the property and its contents. Edmund gave him a complete tour of the mansion and grounds. Looking back, I realize he seemed particularly interested in our outbuildings and storage areas. A shout from the far corner of the carriage house interrupted their conversation. One of the guards had discovered a loose stone in the wall behind a stack of old furniture. When pried free, it revealed a small cavity containing a rolled piece of parchment sealed with black wax. Captain Blackwood broke the seal and unrolled the document. It was a detailed map of the estate, marked with symbols indicating various hiding places throughout the property. Red X marks showed locations in the carriage house, the old mill by the stream, the wine cellar, and even a spot in the rose garden that Cordelia particularly loved. "This is a comprehensive plan," he said grimly. "Someone has been using your estate as a distribution center for stolen goods, probably for months or even years. They've mapped out multiple hiding spots and likely rotate their storage locations to avoid detection. Lady Cordelia studied the map with growing horror. The old mill hasn't been used for grinding grain in over a decade. The wine cellar has been sealed since my father's death because we couldn't afford to maintain the collection. If someone has been accessing these areas, Sergeant Thompson, Captain Blackwood called. Send teams to search the locations marked on this map immediately. I want every hiding spot investigated before sunset. As the guards dispersed to their new assignments, Marcus noticed movement in the distance. A lone rider was approaching the estate at considerable speed, his horse's hooves thundering against the dirt road. As the figure drew closer, he recognized the royal messenger's distinctive blue and gold livery. The messenger dismounted before his horse had fully stopped and approached Captain Blackwood with obvious urgency. "Captain, I bring word from the royal palace. Queen Isabella demands your immediate return. There have been new developments in the case that require your personal attention." "What kind of developments?" Marcus asked, accepting the sealed letter bearing the royal crest. "I am not privy to the details, sir, but the Queen seemed quite distressed. She mentioned something about additional thefts being discovered and the possibility that the situation is far more serious than originally believed." Captain Blackwood read the letter quickly. Queen Isabella's usual elegant handwriting appeared rushed and shaky. She commanded his immediate return to the palace and warned that other noble families had begun reporting missing jewelry pieces. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort by experienced criminals who had been operating undetected for an extended period. "Lieutenant Hayes, you will remain here with half our men to continue the search," Marcus decided. "I want every location on that map thoroughly investigated. Document everything you find and keep Lady Cordelia under protective watch rather than treating her as a suspect." "Protective watch?" Cordelia asked, surprised. "If you're telling the truth about your investigation into the original theft, then you may be in considerable danger. Whoever is behind this operation has gone to great lengths to frame you for their crimes. They may decide it's easier to eliminate you than to risk exposure of their activities." The thought sent a chill through Cordelia that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. She had been so focused on uncovering the truth about the missing royal jewelry that she hadn't fully considered the personal risk involved in confronting criminals with resources and connections throughout the kingdom. "There is something else," she said suddenly, remembering a detail that had seemed insignificant at the time. "During Sir Reginald's visit, I noticed him having a lengthy conversation with someone near the estate's main gate. I couldn't see the other person clearly from my window, but they appeared to be examining the lock mechanisms on our gates and discussing the patrol schedules of our groundskeepers." "Can you describe anything about this other person?" Lieutenant Hayes asked. Tall, wearing a dark cloak with the hood up despite the warm weather, they rode a black horse and seemed familiar with the area, taking shortcuts through the woods that only locals would know. When I mentioned the visitor to Sir Reginald later, he claimed it was simply a lost traveler asking for directions. Captain Blackwood mounted his horse, his expression grim with determination. "Lady Cordelia, I believe your investigation uncovered something much larger than a simple theft. Someone has been orchestrating an elaborate scheme to steal from noble families across the kingdom while using your estate as their base of operations. When you got too close to the truth, they decided to destroy your credibility by framing you for the original crime." "But why frame me specifically?" she asked. "There must be easier targets." "Because," Marcus replied, adjusting his reins, "as keeper of the royal jewelry and a trusted member of the royal family, your testimony about the theft and your subsequent investigation would carry significant weight with Queen Isabella. If you discovered evidence pointing to corruption within the court, your word might be enough to bring down whoever is really responsible." "Be careful, Marcus," Cordelia called as he prepared to leave. "If Sir Reginald is involved, he has the Queen's ear and considerable influence at court. Presenting accusations against him without overwhelming proof could be dangerous for you as well." As Captain Blackwood rode toward the royal palace, his mind churned with questions and possibilities. The discovery of additional stolen goods and the systematic use of Cordelia's estate suggested an operation far more sophisticated than simple theft. Someone with intimate knowledge of noble families, their security arrangements, and their most valuable possessions had been planning and executing these crimes for years. The most disturbing possibility was that the conspiracy might extend beyond Sir Reginald to include other trusted court officials. If that were true, then returning to the palace might be walking directly into the hands of the very criminals he was trying to catch. The royal palace loomed before Captain Blackwood as he approached the main courtyard, its towering spires and gleaming walls a stark contrast to the dark thoughts churning in his mind. Something felt different about the usually bustling palace grounds. Guards stood at unusual positions, and several court officials hurried past with worried expressions, speaking in hushed tones. As Marcus dismounted and handed his horse to a stable boy, Sir Reginald Thorncastle emerged from the main entrance. The royal treasurer's normally immaculate appearance showed signs of strain, with dark circles under his eyes and his usually perfect beard slightly unkempt. When he spotted Captain Blackwood, his face brightened with what appeared to be genuine relief. "Marcus, thank goodness you've returned quickly." Queen Isabella is beside herself with worry. 3 more noble families reported thefts just this morning, and the patterns are identical to the royal jewelry case. We're dealing with something far more serious than we initially believed. Captain Blackwood studied Sir Reginald's face carefully, searching for any sign of deception or nervousness. If the man was indeed the mastermind behind the thefts, he was either an exceptional actor or genuinely unaware of the evidence mounting against him. "What can you tell me about these new reports?" Marcus asked as they walked toward the throne room. The Marquis of Westfield discovered his family's emerald collection missing yesterday evening. This morning, Lady Hartwell reported that her grandmother's diamond tiara had vanished from their family vault. Most disturbing of all, Duke Aldrich's priceless ruby set disappeared sometime during the night, despite his estate being heavily guarded. Sir Reginald paused before the ornate doors of the throne room, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Marcus, there's something else. We've discovered that all of these families, including the royal household, have one thing in common. They all received visits from supposed tax assessors within the past 2 months. These assessors had proper documentation and royal seals, but now we suspect the papers were forged." Captain Blackwood felt his pulse quicken. This information aligned perfectly with Lady Cordelia's account of Sir Reginald's visit to her estate. But if Sir Reginald was now claiming that similar visits had occurred at other targeted locations, either he was attempting to cover his tracks by appearing to help with the investigation, or someone else was using his identity and position for their criminal activities. The throne room doors opened to reveal Queen Isabella, pacing before her seat of power, her usually serene composure replaced by visible agitation. She wore a simple day dress rather than her formal robes, and her crown sat askew as if she had been running her hands through her hair in frustration. "Captain Blackwood," she said immediately upon seeing him, "please tell me you have discovered something useful at Lady Cordelia's estate. This situation is becoming a crisis that threatens the very stability of our kingdom. Your Majesty, I have indeed discovered significant information, though I fear it raises more questions than it answers." Marcus bowed formally before continuing. "Lady Cordelia appears to be innocent of the charges against her. In fact, she may have been investigating the real perpetrators for some time." Queen Isabella's eyes widened. "Explain yourself immediately." Captain Blackwood presented his findings methodically, describing the replicas that had replaced the real Starfire sapphires, Cordelia's detailed investigation notes, and the cache of stolen jewelry discovered hidden on her estate. He also mentioned the map showing multiple hiding places, and the suspicious visit from someone claiming to conduct tax assessments. Someone has been using Lady Cordelia's estate as a storage and distribution center for stolen goods while simultaneously gathering evidence to frame her for the original theft, he concluded. This suggests a carefully planned operation involving someone with detailed knowledge of noble families and their security arrangements. Sir Reginald stepped forward, his face pale. "Your Majesty, if I may, the description of these tax assessment visits matches exactly what we've discovered about the other targeted families. Someone has been systematically surveying noble estates under false pretenses, studying their defenses and cataloging their most valuable possessions. But who could orchestrate such an elaborate scheme?" Queen Isabella demanded. "It would require significant resources, connections throughout the kingdom, and access to official documents and seals." A new voice spoke from the shadows near the throne room's side entrance. "Perhaps I can provide some insight into that question, Your Majesty." Everyone turned to see Edmund Hartwell, Lady Cordelia's butler, stepping into the light. His appearance at the palace was completely unexpected, and Captain Blackwood immediately noticed that the elderly man's hands were shaking slightly. "Edmund?" Marcus said in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I left you at the estate with Lady Cordelia. I rode hard to reach the palace, Captain. After you departed, we made a discovery that changes everything." Edmund approached Queen Isabella and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, I have served the Ashworth family for 40 years, and before that I worked in the royal household for a decade. I know every face and voice in this court." He straightened and looked directly at Sir Reginald. The man who visited our estate claiming to be conducting tax assessments was not Sir Reginald Thorncastle. I have known the real Sir Reginald since he was a young page, and the visitor was someone else entirely, though he bore a remarkable resemblance. The throne room fell silent except for the sound of Queen Isabella's sharp intake of breath. Sir Reginald's face showed a mixture of relief and bewilderment as the implications of Edmund's statement sank in. "Are you certain of this?" the Queen asked urgently. "Absolutely certain, Your Majesty. The impostor was skilled, but he lacked certain knowledge that the real Sir Reginald would possess. When he toured our wine cellar, he failed to recognize a bottle of wine that Sir Reginald himself had recommended to Lord Ashworth years ago. It was a small detail, but it troubled me at the time." Captain Blackwood felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. If someone has been impersonating Sir Reginald to gain access to noble estates, they would need detailed information about his appearance, mannerisms, and background. They would also need access to forged documents bearing authentic royal seals. "But who would have such resources and knowledge?" Sir Reginald asked, clearly shaken by the revelation that someone had been using his identity for criminal purposes. Edmund hesitated before speaking again. "Your Majesty, there is one more thing. When Lieutenant Hayes and his men searched the locations marked on the map, they discovered something significant in the old mill. Hidden beneath the grinding stones, they found a collection of documents that appear to be correspondence between the real criminals." He produced a leather pouch from his coat and handed it to Queen Isabella. "These letters discuss payment schedules, target selection, and distribution of stolen goods. They also mention plans to eliminate Lady Cordelia if she continued her investigation." Queen Isabella opened the pouch with trembling hands and examined the documents. Her face grew increasingly pale as she read, and when she looked up, her expression was one of shocked betrayal. "These letters are signed with a seal I recognize," she said quietly. "They bear the mark of someone I trusted completely, someone who has had access to all of our security arrangements and knowledge of every noble family in the kingdom." She held up one of the documents for all to see. The seal at the bottom was clear and unmistakable. It belonged to Lord Chancellor Aldwin Blackthorne, the second most powerful person in the kingdom and Queen Isabella's chief advisor for over 15 years. "Lord Blackthorne has been orchestrating this entire operation," Queen Isabella said, her voice filled with disbelief and growing anger. "He used his position to access information about noble families, forged official documents using royal seals, and recruited accomplices to impersonate court officials like Sir Reginald. The revelation sent shockwaves through everyone present. Lord Blackthorne was not just any court official. He was the person responsible for maintaining law and order throughout the kingdom, the very man who should have been leading the investigation into the thefts." Queen Isabella rose from her throne with deadly calm, the kind of controlled fury that had made her one of the most respected and feared rulers in the known world. The revelation that her most trusted advisor had betrayed not only her personal confidence, but the entire kingdom sent waves of rage through her entire being. "Where is Lord Blackthorne now?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the throne room like a blade. Sir Reginald stepped forward nervously. "Your Majesty, he left the palace early this morning, claiming urgent business in the eastern provinces. He said he would be gone for several days investigating reports of border disputes with neighboring kingdoms." "Convenient," Captain Blackwood said grimly. "He probably learned that we were getting close to the truth and decided to disappear before we could gather enough evidence to arrest him." Edmund cleared his throat respectfully. "Your Majesty, if I may, there's more information in those documents that might help track his whereabouts. The letters mention a final meeting planned for tonight at an old monastery, ruins about 20 miles north of the capital. According to the correspondence, he intended to retrieve the last of the stolen goods and distribute final payments to his accomplices." Queen Isabella studied the letters more carefully, her royal education allowing her to quickly analyze the tactical situation. "These documents suggest that Lord Blackthorne has been selling the stolen jewelry to buyers in foreign kingdoms, using diplomatic pouches and trade missions to smuggle the goods across borders without detection. That explains his frequent travels, Sir Reginald added, understanding dawning in his eyes. He always claimed to be conducting sensitive diplomatic negotiations that required absolute secrecy. I never questioned his activities because of his position and long service to the crown. Captain Blackwood examined the map that Edmund had brought from the estate, comparing it to the locations mentioned in the intercepted letters. If he's planning to meet his accomplices at the monastery ruins tonight, this might be our only chance to catch him with evidence of his crimes. Once he crosses the border into a neighboring kingdom, he'll be beyond our reach. Then we must act immediately, Queen Isabella declared. Captain Blackwood, I want you to take your best men and surround those ruins before sunset. Capture Lord Blackthorn and anyone working with him. I want them brought back alive to face justice for their crimes. Your Majesty, Marcus said carefully, Lord Blackthorn is not just any criminal. He knows our military tactics, our personnel, and our capabilities better than almost anyone. He's also likely to be heavily armed and prepared for pursuit. This will be extremely dangerous. I understand the risks, the Queen replied firmly, but I will not allow a traitor to escape justice simply because the task is difficult. Take whatever men and resources you need. Edmund stepped forward again. Captain, if I may suggest, Lady Cordelia knows the northern countryside better than most people. Her estate borders the area where these ruins are located, and she's ridden through those woods countless times during her childhood. Her knowledge could prove invaluable. Absolutely not, Marcus said immediately. Lady Cordelia has already been placed in enough danger by this investigation. I won't risk her life further by bringing her along on what amounts to a military raid. With respect, Captain, a new voice said from the throne room entrance. That decision should be mine to make. Everyone turned to see Lady Cordelia herself striding into the room, still wearing her riding clothes and showing signs of having traveled hard to reach the palace. Her face was determined, and her eyes blazed with the kind of anger that came from being hunted and framed for crimes she hadn't committed. Lady Cordelia, Queen Isabella exclaimed, what are you doing here? It could be dangerous for you to leave your estate. Your Majesty, with Lieutenant Hayes and his men protecting my home, I felt it was safe to travel here. Besides, I have information that might be crucial to tonight's operation. She approached the group with confident steps. While examining the letters found at my estate, I noticed something that everyone else missed. She pointed to one of the documents spread across a nearby table. This letter mentions a silver key ceremony scheduled for tonight's meeting. That's not just random phrasing. It's a reference to an actual key. The same silver key that I used to access the royal jewelry vault. Captain Blackwood leaned forward to examine the letter more closely. You think Lord Blackthorn plans to use tonight's meeting to transfer the key to someone else? More than that, Cordelia explained. I believe he intends to create a new keeper of the royal jewelry, someone completely under his control who can continue the theft operation even after the current crisis passes. With a corrupted keeper in place, he could steal and replace royal jewelry pieces indefinitely without detection. The implications were staggering. If Lord Blackthorn succeeded in his plan, the royal family's most precious heirlooms could be systematically looted over years or decades, with the thefts going unnoticed until it was far too late to recover anything. Who could he possibly trust with such a position? Sir Reginald wondered aloud. Someone who already has reason to hate the royal family, Cordelia replied. The letters mention a dispossessed heir who seeks to reclaim what was taken from his family. I believe Lord Blackthorn has recruited someone from a noble family that lost their lands and titles in past conflicts. Queen Isabella paced thoughtfully, her mind working through the political implications. There are several families that could fit that description. The Ravensmiths lost their lands after the Northern Rebellion. The Grimholds were stripped of their titles for treason 20 years ago. Any number of dispossessed nobles might harbor enough resentment to join such a conspiracy. Your Majesty, Captain Blackwood said urgently, if we're going to intercept this meeting, we need to leave immediately. The monastery ruins are difficult to approach without being detected, and we'll need time to position our men effectively. I'm coming with you, Lady Cordelia declared firmly. Absolutely not, Marcus replied. This is far too dangerous. Captain, I know those ruins better than anyone alive. My grandfather used to take me there when I was a child, and I've explored every passage and hidden chamber in the complex. Without my knowledge, you could easily miss secret exits that would allow the criminals to escape. Queen Isabella studied Lady Cordelia's determined expression. She has a valid point, Captain. Local knowledge could be the difference between success and failure. Your Majesty, I must protest. The decision is made. The Queen interrupted. Lady Cordelia will accompany your mission as a guide, but she will remain well away from any direct confrontation. Sir Reginald, you will organize additional backup forces to surround the entire area in case our primary team needs reinforcement. As the group prepared to leave the palace, Edmund approached Captain Blackwood privately. Captain, there's something else you should know. When we discovered those letters at the estate, we also found evidence that Lord Blackthorne has been drugging his victims during his assessment visits, small amounts of sleeping powder in their wine or tea, just enough to make them drowsy while he studied their security arrangements more thoroughly. That explains why none of the targeted families noticed anything suspicious during his visits, Marcus realized. They were too impaired to observe his activities carefully. It also means he's been planning these thefts for much longer than we initially believed, Edmund added. Some of the documents date back over 3 years. This conspiracy has deep roots. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Captain Blackwood assembled his most trusted soldiers in the palace courtyard. The mission ahead would test not only their military skills, but their ability to outthink a master manipulator who had spent years perfecting his criminal enterprise. Lady Cordelia mounted her horse with practiced ease, her riding outfit practical and well-suited for the difficult terrain they would encounter. Despite the danger, she seemed almost relieved to finally have the opportunity to confront the people who had tried to destroy her life and reputation. Remember, Captain Blackwood told his men as they prepared to ride out, Lord Blackthorne is not just a thief. He's a traitor who has betrayed everything we've sworn to protect. Tonight we restore honor to the kingdom and justice for his victims. The ancient monastery ruins rose from the forest floor like broken teeth against the darkening sky. Captain Blackwood crouched behind a fallen stone wall, studying the complex through his spyglass as shadows lengthened across the overgrown courtyard. Lady Cordelia lay beside him, pointing out architectural details that could be crucial to their mission's success. The main meeting chamber is through that archway, she whispered, indicating a partially collapsed entrance. But there are at least 3 other ways to reach it through underground passages. My grandfather showed me a tunnel system that connects the old wine cellars to the bell tower. Captain Blackwood passed the spyglass to his lieutenant, who had taken position on his other side. How many men can you see, Hayes? At least 6 posted as guards around the perimeter, sir. All heavily armed and positioned to watch the main approaches. But if Lady Cordelia is correct about the tunnel system, we might be able to approach unseen. In the distance, the sound of approaching horses echoed through the forest. Captain Blackwood counted the hoofbeats and estimated at least 12 riders moving toward the ruins from the eastern path. As they drew closer, torchlight flickered between the trees, casting dancing shadows that made it difficult to identify specific individuals. That must be Lord Blackthorne and his accomplices arriving for the meeting, Marcus said grimly. Remember, our primary objective is to capture them alive with evidence of their crimes. We need to hear their conversation and witness any exchange of stolen goods or payments. Lady Cordelia pointed to a section of collapsed wall about 50 yards to their left. There's an entrance to the underground passages through that rubble pile. I can guide a small team through the tunnels to reach the main chamber without being detected. Too dangerous, Captain Blackwood replied immediately. If we're discovered in those tunnels, we'll be trapped with no way to escape or call for backup. Marcus, this might be our only chance to get close enough to hear their plans, she argued. If Lord Blackthorne is truly planning to establish a new keeper of the royal jewelry, we need to know who that person is and how they intend to continue the operation. The debate was interrupted by the arrival of the riders in the monastery courtyard. Captain Blackwood trained his spyglass on the group, recognizing Lord Blackthorne's distinctive profile immediately. The Lord Chancellor had traded his elegant court robes for practical traveling clothes, but his bearing and mannerisms were unmistakable. With him rode a figure that Captain Blackwood didn't recognize initially, a tall man with a scarred face and the bearing of someone accustomed to violence. Behind them came several others, including what appeared to be merchants or traders based on their clothing and the heavy packs strapped to their horses. The man with the scars, Lady Cordelia said, studying the group through the spyglass. I've seen him before. He was asking questions about my estate in the village several months ago, claiming to be interested in purchasing property in the area. Probably scouting your defenses and gathering information about your household routines, Captain Blackwood realized. Lord Blackthorn has been planning this frame job for much longer than we thought. The group in the courtyard began unloading their horses, removing several heavy chests and cloth-wrapped bundles. Even from their distant position, the watchers could see the glint of metal and jewels as torchlight reflected off the contents of the containers. That has to be the stolen jewelry collection, Lieutenant Hayes observed. They're preparing to divide it among the buyers. Lord Blackthorn raised his voice to address the assembled group, his words carrying clearly across the still evening air. Gentlemen, tonight marks the successful completion of our enterprise's first phase. The jewelry we've recovered represents just the beginning of what we can accomplish with proper organization and planning. Captain Blackwood felt his anger building as he listened to the traitor speak about theft and betrayal as if they were legitimate business activities. The man had sworn oaths of loyalty to Queen Isabella and the kingdom, oaths he had broken for personal gain and greed. The beauty of our system, Lord Blackthorn continued, is that it can operate indefinitely without detection. With Lady Cordelia discredited and facing charges for our crimes, we can install our chosen replacement as keeper of the royal jewelry. From that position, we can systematically loot the royal collection over years while maintaining the appearance of legitimate oversight. A new voice spoke from the group, one that Captain Blackwood recognized with shock. And what guarantee do we have that this replacement keeper will remain loyal to our cause, rather than exposing us to save himself? The speaker was Sir Marcus Grimhold, a former court official who had been stripped of his position and exiled from the kingdom 5 years earlier for embezzling funds from the royal treasury. His presence explained the reference to a dispossessed heir in the intercepted letters. Sir Marcus raises a valid concern, Lord Blackthorn replied smoothly, which is why I've taken certain precautions to ensure continued cooperation. He gestured to one of his men, who brought forward a small wooden box. Inside this container are documents that would incriminate our new keeper in numerous crimes, including treason against the crown. Should he ever consider betraying us, these papers would ensure his immediate execution. Lady Cordelia grabbed Captain Blackwood's arm urgently. Marcus, those documents could be used to frame anyone for crimes they didn't commit, just like they did to me. We have to stop this exchange before they can complete their plans. I agree, but we need to coordinate our attack carefully, he replied. Hayes, signal the men positioned on the north side. When I give the word, we'll move simultaneously from all directions. The lieutenant crept away to relay the orders, leaving Captain Blackwood and Lady Cordelia to continue observing the criminal meeting. In the courtyard below, Lord Blackthorn was opening the chests to display their contents to potential buyers. The firelight revealed an astonishing collection of jewelry, precious stones, and valuable artifacts representing years of systematic theft. My God, Cordelia whispered. There must be enough treasure down there to fund a small army. Which might explain Lord Blackthorn's ultimate goal, Captain Blackwood realized with growing alarm. This isn't just about personal enrichment. He could be planning to use these funds to finance a rebellion against Queen Isabella's rule. The possibility sent chills through both watchers. If Lord Blackthorn had been planning a coup attempt, his position as Lord Chancellor would have given him access to military secrets, troop movements, and strategic information that could make him extremely dangerous to the kingdom's stability. Sir Marcus Grimhold stepped forward to examine one of the treasure chests more closely. The foreign buyers you mentioned, are they prepared to make payment tonight, or will this be another delay like last month's meeting? Payment in full as agreed, Lord Blackthorn assured him. Our contacts in the neighboring kingdoms are eager to acquire these pieces for their own royal collections. They ask no questions about provenance and pay premium prices for quality merchandise. And the girl? Sir Marcus asked, clearly referring to Lady Cordelia. She won't be a problem anymore? Lord Blackthorn's expression darkened. Lady Cordelia has been more persistent than anticipated, but her investigation ends tonight. Once she's officially charged with the thefts and either imprisoned or executed, any evidence she might have gathered becomes irrelevant. Captain Blackwood felt his blood boil at the casual way these men discussed destroying an innocent woman's life. He checked his weapons one final time and prepared to give the signal for attack. One final concern, Sir Marcus continued. Captain Blackwood has always been thorough in his investigations. What if he discovers evidence that contradicts the case against Lady Cordelia? Captain Blackwood won't be conducting any further investigations, Lord Blackthorne replied with cold certainty. I've already arranged for his reassignment to a remote border posting where mysterious accidents tend to occur with unfortunate frequency. The threat against his own life was the final straw for Captain Blackwood. He raised his arm to signal the attack, but before he could complete the motion, a commotion erupted from the far side of the courtyard. Shouts of alarm rang out as several of Lord Blackthorne's guards discovered Lieutenant Hayes and his men approaching through the forest. The battle erupted with shocking suddenness as palace guards emerged from multiple positions around the monastery ruins. Captain Blackwood drew his sword and charged toward the courtyard, shouting commands to his men while Lord Blackthorne's criminals scrambled to defend themselves and protect their stolen treasure. Secure the chests, Captain Blackwood ordered as he parried a sword thrust from one of the guards. Don't let them destroy the evidence! Lord Blackthorne himself proved to be a formidable opponent, despite his advanced age and court position. His blade work showed the skill of someone who had trained extensively in combat, suggesting that his treachery had been planned for years with careful preparation for exactly this type of confrontation. You're too late, Blackwood, the traitor snarled as their swords clashed. Even if you capture me tonight, the network we've established will continue operating. You cannot stop what we've set in motion. We'll see about that, Captain Blackwood replied grimly, pressing his attack with renewed vigor. Lady Cordelia had initially remained hidden behind the stone wall as ordered, but when she saw Sir Marcus Grimhold attempting to escape through one of the underground passages she had described, she couldn't resist taking action. Moving carefully through the shadows, she reached the tunnel entrance just as the former court official was disappearing into the darkness below. Without hesitation, she followed him into the ancient passage system, relying on childhood memories to navigate the treacherous underground route. The tunnels were exactly as she remembered them, with low stone ceilings and walls that wept moisture from decades of neglect. Above ground, the battle continued with fierce intensity. Lieutenant Hayes had successfully captured 2 of the criminal merchants along with one of the treasure chests, but several other accomplices were still fighting desperately to escape with their shares of the stolen goods. Captain Blackwood found himself facing both Lord Blackthorne and the scarred man who had been scouting Lady Cordelia's estate. The 2-on-1 odds were challenging, but Marcus had trained extensively for such situations and managed to keep both opponents at bay while gradually forcing them toward a corner where escape would be impossible. Surrender, now, and Queen Isabella might show mercy, he offered, though his tone suggested he personally hoped they would refuse. Mercy? Lord Blackthorne laughed bitterly. I've served that ungrateful woman for 15 years, giving her my best advice and loyal service only to watch her grant titles and rewards to newer favorites while ignoring my contributions. I owe her nothing. You swore an oath of loyalty, Captain Blackwood reminded him, landing a solid hit that drew blood from the traitor's sword arm. Oaths mean nothing when they're not reciprocated with respect and proper recognition, Lord Blackthorne replied, though his responses were becoming increasingly labored as the fight continued. Meanwhile, in the underground passages, Lady Cordelia had caught up to Sir Marcus Grimhold in a circular chamber that had once served as the monastery's wine cellar. The former court official was struggling to drag a heavy sack of jewelry through a narrow opening that led to an external exit. Stop right there, Sir Marcus, she commanded, though she carried no weapon except a small dagger meant for cutting rope rather than combat. He turned to face her with a mixture of surprise and contempt. Lady Cordelia Ashworth, the kingdom's most notorious jewel thief. How fitting that we should meet in person before your inevitable execution. The only person facing execution tonight is you, she replied with more confidence than she felt. Captain Blackwood and his men have already captured most of your accomplices. Your criminal enterprise is finished. Perhaps, but I still have enough treasure here to live comfortably in exile, Sir Marcus said, hefting the sack he carried. And I have one final card to play. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small vial filled with clear liquid. Concentrated poison, tasteless and odorless. 1 drop in the palace water supply would eliminate Queen Isabella and several dozen court officials within hours. Even if tonight's operation fails, I can still achieve my ultimate goal of revenge against those who destroyed my family. Lady Cordelia felt a chill of horror at the casual way he discussed mass murder. You're insane if you think poisoning innocent people will somehow restore your honor or your family's reputation. Honor? Sir Marcus laughed harshly. Honor doesn't pay debts or feed hungry children. When the crown stripped my family of everything we had worked generations to build, they took our honor along with our lands and titles. Now I intend to take something equally precious from them. The standoff continued for several tense moments before Lady Cordelia noticed that water was beginning to seep through cracks in the chamber's stone walls. The underground stream that had once powered the monastery's mill was flooding the lower passages, probably due to recent heavy rains in the mountains. Sir Marcus, we need to leave this chamber immediately, she warned. The water level is rising and these tunnels can flood completely within minutes. A convenient story, he replied skeptically, but I won't be tricked into abandoning my escape route. As if to prove her point, water suddenly burst through a weakened section of wall, sending a torrent rushing across the chamber floor. Sir Marcus stumbled backward in surprise, dropping both his sack of treasure and the vial of poison. Lady Cordelia lunged forward, grabbing the vial before it could shatter on the stone floor while simultaneously kicking the sack of jewelry beyond his reach. The rising water was now knee-deep and climbing rapidly. Both of them struggled toward the chamber's main exit, but Sir Marcus's greed overcame his survival instincts. Instead of following Lady Cordelia to safety, he waded back into the flooding chamber to retrieve his treasure. Leave it, she called out. The jewelry isn't worth your life. But Sir Marcus refused to abandon his stolen goods. As he bent to lift the heavy sack, another wall section gave way, releasing a massive surge of water that knocked him off his feet. The current was too strong for him to fight, and he disappeared beneath the surface with a final, desperate scream. Lady Cordelia barely managed to reach higher ground before the chamber filled completely with water. She clutched the poison vial tightly, knowing that its capture might have prevented a massacre at the royal palace. Above ground, Captain Blackwood had finally gained the upper hand in his fight with Lord Blackthorn and his remaining accomplice. The scarred man had been wounded and captured, while the traitorous Lord Chancellor found himself backed against a crumbling wall with nowhere left to retreat. It's over. Blackthorn, Captain Blackwood declared, his sword point inches from the traitor's throat. Surrender now or face the consequences. Lord Blackthorn looked around the courtyard, seeing his criminal network in ruins and his dreams of wealth and power crumbling like the ancient monastery walls. With a sigh of defeat, he dropped his weapon and raised his hands in surrender. I suppose 15 years of loyal service count for nothing when measured against one mistake in judgment, he said bitterly. One mistake? Captain Blackwood replied incredulously. You orchestrated a conspiracy that lasted for years, stole priceless artifacts from dozens of families, and attempted to frame an innocent woman for your crimes. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of deliberate evil. As the palace guards secured their prisoners and recovered the stolen treasure, Lady Cordelia emerged from the underground passages, still clutching the vial of poison. Captain Blackwood rushed to her side, relief evident on his face. Cordelia, thank God you're safe. I told you to stay hidden during the fighting. Sir Marcus Grimhold tried to escape through the tunnels, she explained, showing him the vial. He had this with him. Enough poison to kill everyone in the palace. The underground chambers flooded, and he chose his treasure over his life. He didn't survive. Captain Blackwood examined the vial with growing alarm. If he had succeeded in reaching the palace with this— But he didn't, Lady Cordelia interrupted firmly. The conspiracy is finished. The real criminals have been captured or killed, and the stolen jewelry will be returned to its rightful owners. 3 days later, the great hall of the royal palace was filled with representatives from noble families throughout the kingdom, as Queen Isabella presided over a ceremony to return their stolen treasures. Lord Blackthorn sat in chains before the throne, awaiting formal sentencing for his crimes of treason, theft, and conspiracy. Lord Blackthorn, Queen Isabella declared in a voice that carried to every corner of the hall, "You have betrayed not only my personal trust but the sacred oaths that bind all who serve the crown. Your crimes have shaken the very foundations of our kingdom's security and honor. Your sentence is death, to be carried out at dawn tomorrow. However, in recognition of your years of previous service, I offer you one final opportunity to redeem a small portion of your honor. Provide us with the names and locations of any remaining accomplices who were not captured at the monastery, and your death will be swift and merciful rather than prolonged." Lord Blackthorn considered this offer for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I accept your terms, Your Majesty. There are indeed others who were not present that night." Lady Cordelia stood beside Captain Blackwood as they watched justice being served. Her name had been completely cleared, and Queen Isabella had personally apologized for the suspicion that had fallen upon her. More importantly, her investigation had been vindicated, and her careful documentation had provided crucial evidence for the prosecution. "What will you do now?" Captain Blackwood asked quietly. "Will you return to your estate and resume your quiet life away from court politics?" Lady Cordelia smiled, the first genuinely happy expression she had worn in weeks. "Actually, Queen Isabella has offered me a new position. She wants me to establish a royal investigative service to prevent this kind of conspiracy from ever developing again. Someone needs to watch the watchers, as it were." "And you accepted?" "I did. It seems I have a talent for uncovering uncomfortable truths, and the kingdom needs people willing to ask difficult questions about those in positions of power." Captain Blackwood grinned. "In that case, I suppose we'll be working together frequently. Queen Isabella has tasked me with heading the new palace security protocols that will support your investigative work." As the ceremony concluded, and the various nobles departed with their recovered treasures, Lady Cordelia and Captain Blackwood walked together through the palace gardens. The crisis that had threatened to destroy her life had ultimately led to new opportunities, and the chance to serve the kingdom in ways she had never imagined possible. The Starfire sapphires gleamed once again in their rightful place within the royal jewelry collection. But more importantly, the kingdom had learned valuable lessons about the price of blind trust and the necessity of constant vigilance against corruption in high places.